How are you? You all right? I'm not from here. Can you tell? Yes. All right. I thank you to everybody. Thank you for having me here. This has been such a great show. How about one more round of applause for the storytellers tonight? And the audio pieces, which I thought were like really, really great. I thought that was great. So it's been great. And how about for Ben? One more round of applause for Ben. All right, here we go. So I am a fifth generation native New Yorker. And while there is definitely something cool about that, there is also a downside. You know, like there was this moment when it occurred to me that while, you know, many other families also, you know, came to America and first landed in New York, for the most part, at some point, they kept going, you know, pioneering their way west with little more than the rags on their backs and all of that. You know, when meanwhile, it was like my own people, you know, got off a boat, took 2 steps, looked around, and went, good enough for me, forever. It's like I come from people to whom, you know, discovering the great unknown means New Jersey. Anyway, it did not take me too long to realize that the reason for this was sort of a combo of, you know, lack of money and fear. And that fear pervaded everything, you know, not just where you live, but what you do for a living. You know, it was like you just find the first solid thing that comes along and you hold on tight and you don't risk going any further. But as it turns out, my mother was something of a pioneer herself, although not without her share of false starts. So at 20 years old, my mom had hardly been outside of Brooklyn. And when she did finally leave a year later, it was only because she married a guy from Queens, which she then called the country. Anyway, they had a baby, me, but by the time I was 2, my parents had divorced. And so to make a little extra money afterwards, my mom had to take on this weekend job cleaning apartments. So the very first apartment that my mom ever cleaned was like this duplex, right? And it had like, you know, Manhattan skyline views, and it was filled with antiques and artwork. But as it winds up, it would be her very last house cleaning job, because over the course of a year, she would go from being the cleaning lady to the secretary to the girlfriend of the multimillionaire who owned it, named Mark. Now, they never wound up living together sort of full time. You know, they were both divorced, and there was a little of like, you know, been there, done that, didn't work. But also, my mom kind of had this philosophy, which was if you take somebody's money, you have to take their advice. And so when it came to raising me, she wanted to do it her way, and so she felt it had to be on her dime. So she went on to spend every weekday home in Queens, and then every weekend with him, living this dual life for the next 22 years. And on the weekends when I was not with my father, I was right there with her. So together, you know, my mom and I had sort of become like, you know, super women, able to jump social strata in a single bound. So because of my mom's plan, you know, my life was really like never very different than anybody else around me in Queens, you know, and I wasn't moved to like a fancy penthouse apartment or sent to a private school or anything. I just grew into your typical Queens teenager, you know. I smoked blunts and I drank 40s, and my best friend had a baby in high school. I was a walking cliche. In every way, except for the fact that I still spent every odd weekend talking with this brilliant, art-collecting, croquet-playing man at his summer house in the Hamptons. And when I say talking with him, I really mean it. Like, I don't mean like we made just a little chit-chat or anything. I mean that after dinner, every odd Saturday night for 20 years of my life, Mark would ask me some enormous, like, existential question. He would say, like, if I told you that the universe was infinite, how would that make you feel? And for that one, I was 5 years old. But I loved it. I lived for it. And we would go on and on and on. And sometimes we'd go on for so long that my mom would kind of leave us to it, you know. And this one time she left us to it, and then we had gone on for so long that finally she came back into the room and she was like, are you two gonna talk about the moon and the stars all night? And that's what they came to be called, our Moon and Stars Talks. All right, so at 16, like every other teenager, I did not want to be away from my friends for 5 minutes, let alone, a whole weekend. And so for the first time, I decided to call Mark and see if I could bring my friends to his country place. And it just was, went something like this. I called him up, and he was like, Mark speaking. And I was like, hey, this is Tara. Could I bring some friends this weekend? And he's like, that would be fine. Click. He was not one for small talk. So the problem wasn't him. The problem was that some of my friends had no idea about any of this dual life business. And it's not, honestly, that I was sort of trying to keep it from them or anything. It's just that, the details weren't always easy to, slip into conversation. They'd be like, hey, Tara, you want to come smoke and drink on the corner this weekend? And I'd be like, well, I had been thinking of discussing the Hudson River School painters over dinner in Bridgehampton. But what the hell, The only thing that I can think to kind of compare it to, is sort of my own coming out, the only thing I could think to say is I was like, I have to tell you guys something, but I hope you find it in your heart to accept me, but I know a rich guy, But, okay, I wanted my friends to come, of course. I did not want them to be shocked or embarrassed, and so I had to explain it to them. And so literally one day in the playground, while on one side of the playground, kids were, playing handball and beating the shit out of each other because that's how we do recess in Queens. On the other side of the playground, I had huddled up with my friend Lynette, and I was trying to explain to her what it means to go antiquing, But before you know it, there we are, right? It's me, it's my friend Lynette, and it's her boyfriend Rob, and we have piled into his little red, hoopty, and we are flying down the highway. We are heading from Hollis to the Hamptons. Now, for brevity's sake, let's just say that Rob is kind of like Eminem, and Lynette's kind of like an Italian Rosie Perez, and they're in the front and I'm in the back. And as we're getting closer to the house, I'm thinking of more and more things that I need to explain to them, and I'm kind of getting a little bit nervous, and I'm like, did I tell you guys, did I tell you guys about the ketchup? And they're like, the ketchup? No. And I'm like, listen, you can't put the ketchup bottle on the table. And Lynette's like, where the hell do you put it? The floor? And I'm like, no, you gotta take the ketchup out of the bottle and you gotta put it into a little bowl with a spoon. Don't ask, all right? And then we keep going, and I think of more stuff, and finally I'm like, oh, I forgot to tell you guys, there's no TV there. And they were like, dear God, that always got the biggest reaction, right? Now, of course, that leads me to have to explain to my friends what we do after dinner instead of watch TV, which is, of course, the talks, the Moon and Stars talks. And like I said to you earlier, I loved these talks, but in all honesty, they were not for the faint of heart, meaning Mark did not care if you were some kid unaccustomed to this kind of thing. He was going to talk with you, and he was going to argue with you like you were his peer, and he was going to fully expect you to keep up. And I just didn't know if, my friends were going to be into that or he was going to be into them, but too late. There we are, pulling into the driveway. So the most shocking thing that you first saw at Mark's house was not actually the house itself, which was this historic 5-bedroom mansion. It was not even the hand-laid stone lagoon pool. It was not even the full regulation English-style croquet court. It was Mark himself. Mark stood 6 feet 10 inches tall. He was 6'10". And so the look on my friends' faces when they first saw him was sort of as if their eyes were like saying, is that a man or is that oak tree wearing chinos, right? Now, probably because my friends just like completely ignored all of my stupid paranoia, all of this, the day went completely without a hitch. But that night, as we were finishing up dinner, I kind of knew that maybe the questions were coming. And I started getting a little nervous again. And then all of a sudden, we finish dessert, and he tips back in his chair. And he's like, so, if we were to presume we could fix all of the societal ills right here and now, where would you begin? Go, right? Now you have to understand that nobody is asking us these kinds of questions, right? Like nobody is asking us these kinds of questions. And like maybe, we're sort of at an age where you might be starting to think bigger picture, you might be starting to think what you want to do, with your life, what you want to do for a living. But it's also like we come from a place where it only ever felt like there were 2 job options, right? Cop, not a cop. I mean, what else could there be, really, Just meaning, like your parents, you took the first solid city job you could find, and you were proud, and you did your best, and you held on for dear life, and you did it forever, right? So, solving all of society's ills, give me a break, mister. So instantly, my eyes just, drop to my lap. I may have even closed them. But then I hear Rob say something, and I kind of look up, and right as I do, Lynette has disagreed with what he said, and Mark is just nodding along, and just like that, it's on. And not just this one time. My friends would come back for many more moon and stars talks over the years. And while it's obviously a very beautiful thing, it's also just a little bit sad, because what most of them would tell you today is that those talks alone forever changed the way we thought of ourselves, They just made us think that maybe there was a little more to us than we knew. And I can't speak for all of them, but I can certainly speak for me. They sort of made you think, well, shit. If A, the universe is infinite, and B, I like talking about all these big things, then C, there's probably more job options than cop, right? And I think at the very least, these conversations sort of gave us something that, unfortunately, our parents didn't have. And that's just, the confidence to know when we got to that crossroads in life, just the confidence to know that we had a choice. And so today, I live in Manhattan, a whopping 20 minutes away from where I grew up. But that is not because of fear. That is my choice. Thank you.